Examined in detail, events can often be seen to unfold in strange and unexpected ways. And the stranger the circumstances, the more unexpected the results. Of course, there are those events that are never fully explained. The unsolved mysteries that strain the limits of a mind's perceptions and stain the records with inexplicable evidence. My name is Mr. Mysterious. Come with me as we once more examine these unsolved mysteries caught on tape. Life can be hard. Though this simple fact is etched into the forefront of our modern perceptions, it really is hard to truly empathize with those suffering beneath the miasma of poverty. And, thankfully, it may be beyond us to truly know what it's like to live as a child confined within a homeless shelter, under the thumb of apathetic and reportedly abusive parents. This was the life of Relisha Rudd, an 8-year-old girl living within a state-run homeless shelter in Washington, D.C., situated between a methadone clinic and a morgue. Abused and neglected by her parents, she would often cling to both her relatives and school teachers, desperate to escape the confines of the bed-bug-ridden hospital that served as the temporary shelter to her and her family. Seeking help from dire circumstances that no child should have had to endure, yet finding nothing beyond short respites through the after-school activities and temporary volunteer caregivers. In such appalling circumstances, it really was only a matter of time until something went very, very wrong. And then, tragically, it did. Care of Relisha was handed over to Khalil Tatum, a 51-year-old janitor at the homeless shelter, and she was never returned to her family. Records and footage exist to confirm that she was still in Tatum's care up until March the 1st. But after that, the child was never seen again. Relisha's parents never filed a missing persons report. There's at least a chance, considering the documented neglect and drug usage of her mother, that they simply never even noticed Relisha was gone. On March the 13th, just over 2 weeks after she was placed into the care of Tatum, which her mother denied ever doing, despite video evidence to the contrary, a buildup of school absences attracted the attention of social workers. Yet another week later, the D.C. police opened an investigation into the whereabouts of Relisha Rudd and the man she was last seen with, Khalil Tatum. Reportedly, Tatum had had similar contact with other young girls at the homeless shelter, despite social interactions between those living in the shelter and employees being forbidden. He would reportedly offer the young children gifts of money, perhaps simply taking pity on individuals clearly in need of charity, or perhaps as a precursor to something more serious. We may never know Tatum's true intentions, however, as shortly after the police began to investigate the disappearance of Relisha, Tatum's wife was found dead in a motel with a bullet in her head, and shortly afterwards, his body was found in a shed. It's believed that he shot himself. An outpouring of support for Relisha from sympathetic parties swept across D.C. shortly after her disappearance, with hundreds of interested parties posting flyers and missing posters throughout the city. But Relisha Rudd has yet to be found. Several search operations have been held with no positive results, and the local police have effectively given up on finding her alive. They're not likely to discover anything, with most of the individuals associated with this case being either unreliable or dead. Searches like this may be our only hope of uncovering the truth of what happened to Relisha. The streets of England are not safe to walk alone at night. More than a few individuals have disappeared after closing time. And while most are usually found shortly after in various conditions and states, an unlucky few aren't so fortunate. This is the last known footage of Chad Gibson, a Newquay resident and father captured on the 19th of December, 2015. In it, Chad is seen walking through the center of the South English coastal town in the early evening, accompanied by another man. Shortly afterwards, Chad was gone, leaving behind a 10-year-old daughter and his worried mother. According to the mother and dozens of locals, Chad's disappearance was out of character for him. It's reportedly unlikely that he simply chose to disappear, and yet no sign of him has been found since. The police currently have no suspects, and though Cornwall police recently unearthed a body that was suspected to have once been Chad, further testing showed that the corpse was not a match. Chad may very well still be out there, somewhere. As with all missing person cases, the likelihood of finding the individual alive decreases dramatically as the investigation continues. Nonetheless, Chad's mother, who was midway through planning a funeral for her missing son when the police informed her that the recovered body was not Chad, has put up a £2,000 reward for information about the whereabouts of her son. It's hard to imagine what his family has been through and continue to endure as the weeks turn into months with no resolution in sight and no closure to be found. Sometimes, life just doesn't let up. Problems pile up on top of misfortune and spiral out of control, with heartbreaking results. This was the case for the Coronado family, based out of Texas, where Cesar Coronado was discovered dead 60 miles outside of his hometown on the 13th of March, 2016. His corpse had been shot and burned, found a significant distance from his vehicle, also burned out. Cesar's death was eventually determined to be related to the trafficking of cocaine. The Texas father had apparently been working with others to transport a large quantity of cocaine via commercial bus service, and someone wanted him dead. In this footage, released by the police as part of a request for further information on a man suspected to be related to the murder, we see the unknown individual running away through a parking lot, having recently ignited Cesar's pickup truck. The haste and professional nature of this act immediately linked it to the cartels. For any other case, it would have been a simple matter of tracking down the individuals involved and hopefully working to stem the influx of narcotics through the area. But there was a complication. Adriana Coronado, the 14-year-old daughter of Cesar, was also reported missing. At first, it was suspected that the men that had killed Cesar had abducted Adriana, but as the days passed, hopes for her safety began to flicker as no ransom demands were made, nor were there any attempts to contact the family from Adriana or those that might have kidnapped her. And 3 days later, the worst came to pass as a young body, shot, burned, and decomposing, was found on a rural property 80 miles from home. There were signs of sexual assault. It was Adriana. The popular theory states that Adriana was simply unlucky enough to have seen her father's murder, that the 14-year-old Texas girl was simply a witness that needed to be silenced permanently. What do you think? Is this simply the tragic spiral of a man caught up in the brutal drug trafficking trade? Was young Adriana's tragic death merely collateral damage to ensure the continued business of the individuals that killed and burned her father? Or do you suspect that there is more to this particular mystery? Post below in the comments with your own theory on what occurred. There are very few of us that haven't dreamed of running away from school at one point or another, of rushing past the guards, bursting through the sealed doors, hopping the walls and fences before running off towards freedom. Avanti Akendo felt much the same way. Diagnosed with severe autism at a young age, Avante lived much of his life in a regimented, protected environment, constantly overseen and guarded from the dangers of the world at large. The young boy developed an obsession with running. He was an avid sprinter, winning medals at school events. Maybe he just wanted to escape the supervision, the regime. And one day, in early October of 2014, shortly after making the transition to middle school, Avante saw his chance and took it. Finding a door that had been carelessly left open by a member of the staff after breaking away from his watchers, Avante ran through it and off into the city of New York. This would be the last time young Avante was seen alive. A series of miscommunications resulted in the school attempting to quietly solve the problem. The staff were misinformed and assumed that Avante was still within the school, and they were unable to access security footage due to a mismanagement of access codes. By the time they had discovered what had happened and notified the police, an hour had passed. By that point, Avante could have been anywhere. The media was called, lawyers were brought in, and the mayor himself sided with the school. The search continued, with tempers flaring on both sides as accusations of incompetence and bias were hurled. And 3 months later, the decomposing body of a young child was fished out of the water in a park in Queens. Avante's corpse was in such poor condition that the exact cause of death was indeterminate. No one knows what happened to Avante prior to his death. To this day, the police have yet to definitively state anything about Avante's disappearance, as they have not finished their report. However, they have publicly stated that they suspect he fell into a park river and drowned, perhaps after falling from a height where his body floated until it was found several months later. This, however, has been contested by Avante's mother, who insists that her son could not have floated that far, even over a period of several months. In addition, she claims that the police had searched the area prior and discovered nothing, and has gone so far as to state that everything is fabricated to me. I don't think they're ever going to say, really, what happened. There's no closure. There's no answers. Avante's tragic death, no matter the circumstances, has inspired a great deal of change within New York, and a law requiring the alarming of all school doors bears his name. But perhaps a greater legacy still is the mystery of the running boy. What happened to Avante, and is the evidence of the circumstances of his death really fabricated? The medical officer ruled out foul play of any sort, but it was stated within the same report that the nature of Avante's remains rendered any conclusion potentially indefinitive. Will we ever know the fate of Avante? Though their fates are uncertain, please remember that all of the above cases relate to the deaths and disappearances of real people, and, as such, to remain respectful to both them and the families that have lost them. It's a sad truth of our times that, though those that commit acts of violence and evil upon their fellow man are often apprehended by the authorities, sooner or later, a select few escape the clutches of justice through planning, corruptive forces, or sheer dumb luck. These unidentified individuals, very rarely free from the moral consequences of their actions, have at least a chance of living their lives with no legal reprisals. But perhaps rarer than the unidentified offender is the unknown victim. In this increasingly connected society, where the watchful eyes of CCTV dot the streets and we are encouraged more and more to post, tweet, and announce our feelings and actions, there are more avenues to identification than ever before, which makes the case of Peter Bergman all the more intriguing. We do not know the true name of the man that died on Osilgo Beach on a misty Irish morning back in 2009. Nor do we know where he came from or what his true intentions were that night. He gave a false Austrian address and spoke with a thick German accent, which has led some to suspect that his origins were European. But even in the 7 years since Bergman's death, precious little information has been uncovered about what or who may have motivated him to do what he did. Bergman arrived in Silgo on the 12th of June and proceeded to disappear over the following days. During this time, he was recorded purchasing stamps, disposing of unknown items in the blind spots of Silgo's security network, and he reportedly asked a local taxi driver for recommendations on local beaches. Bit by bit, the man seemed to discard his personal effects, his seemingly irrational actions belying a pattern that, to this day, no one but he himself has ever understood. On the 15th of June, Bergman was seen walking towards Ross's Point by no less than 16 people in the early evening. By the following morning, he was dead, found naked on the beaches of Ross's Point by a triathlete and his father. The post-mortem report declared that the man known as Peter Bergman had drowned, though the circumstances of his death raised many questions. How had he drowned? Why were his clothes scattered about the beach? And had he planned this all along? Was this the suicide of an elderly man, or something more sinister? Further autopsy reports revealed that Bergman was lacking a kidney and had suffered significant heart trauma, while he also appeared to be suffering from the later stages of prostate cancer and possessed several bone tumors. The report concluded that the unknown man would have been in significant pain and would have most likely required extremely strong prescription pain medication, or at least over-the-counter pharmaceuticals, to manage his levels. Many theories exist regarding the intentions and fate of the man that called himself Peter Bergman. It could have simply been suicide by drowning in an environment that some might consider idyllic. Maybe he sought to start a new life in Ireland, to live his final days, and tragically overestimated his ability to handle the rocky Irish coastline. Perhaps he simply wished to be remembered, and with the humor of a dying man, resolved to leave behind a legacy, an unsolvable mystery, as neither the local police, the Austrian police, nor Interpol seem to have any desire to investigate this case further. We may simply never know. Do you have a theory? Tell us what your perspective on the Bergman events is in the comments below. If you find it mysterious, share and like this video. Also, be sure to subscribe because you don't want to miss what's coming next. As always, thank you for watching.